Today on Paul's Old Crap, we're going to install the NeXTSTEP operating system on a Sun SPARCstation Model 5. The first public release of NeXTSTEP was in the late 1980s, and what you'll be seeing in this video is version 3.3 released in 1995. NeXTSTEP 3.3 is available for traditional Motorola 68000 based Next hardware, the Intel x86, PA RISC systems from HP, and of course the Sun SPARC. Future versions of the operating system were renamed to OpenSTEP with the inclusion of the OpenSTEP API. So in today's video, we're going to install NeXTSTEP version 3.3 on a Sun SPARCstation 5. I chose the Sun over actual Next hardware because I wasn't really willing to spend upwards of $1,000 on a Next cube when I could spend $30 on a SPARCstation and kind of end up with the same result. Now, obviously, it's not going to be the same user experience as someone using NeXTSTEP in the 90s may have, but this is a whole lot cheaper than actual Next hardware. So we're going to take a little tour of the SPARCstation 5. I'll describe some of the differences between this and some of the other models, such as the Model 10 and the Model 20. But I'll make a note of a few things here that you will need. What I've got here, this is the Sun Type 6 keyboard and the Type 6 mouse. These have plugs that kind of look like PS2, but they're not. These are required to use the Sun SPARCstation. You will need a Type 5 or Type 6. The Type 6 is, well, the mouse isn't that bad. I prefer this over the Type 5 mouse. The keyboard, however, the Type 6 keyboard is horrible. It's quite literally garbage. When I received it, half the keys had fallen out, and the spacebar sometimes doesn't work properly. But this was also, both of these was $20 on eBay because someone had listed it as a PS2 when they didn't know it was the Sun proprietary cable. So I got this for real cheap. In comparison, a Type 5 keyboard and mouse, I would have been looking at least $50 or $60, so I wasn't willing to spend that much money on this project. So if you don't already have a keyboard and mouse for your Sun, you will need that. You will also need a CD-ROM drive if yours does not include one. If you look at the side of this unit, there normally would be a floppy drive and a CD-ROM in here. However, the recycler I bought this from, I guess, conveniently removed these items from the computer. Kind of annoying. I do have my external Apple CD-ROM, which does support the 512 byte sectors or some crap like that. This is the same drive I used to install IREX on my SGI Indie. So now the Sun CD-ROM will of course support that format because it's something that Sun uses in all their drives or whatever. But if you don't have your internal CD-ROM drive, a comparable unit from Apple should do the job. This is the Apple CD600, which is a 4-speed drive, and I've had no problems with this doing any of the NeXTSTEP CDs and stuff like that. So I guess we might as well take a closer look at the inside of this unit now too. So to access the inside of your SPARCstation, I've already got it unscrewed, but you'll want to just undo, I think there'd be a screw right in there and the one on the end there. So make sure those are off and the lid is able to come up like that. On the front, this is where it actually hinges right at the bottom here. So when we lift this up, it'll come down like this, and it's these bits right in here which go into the holes there. So just carefully remove your lid, and let's take a look inside of this unit. Now, this unit did not come with a hard drive. However, it did come with the little tray things that you need to actually insert the drives. So what I do have in this machine is a 73 gigabyte SCA drive, which is the 80 pin or something like that, and it goes the power and the SCSI ID selector go through this instead of separate cables. Well, I'm not going to install NeXTSTEP on this drive for the video. I actually already have the install on here. There is something you need to know about NeXTSTEP and large drives. You can't really just install it directly onto a large drive. There is a hack you can do if you have a floppy drive and you're able to edit the installer script during the process. But NeXTSTEP will not support anything over 2 gigabytes in size. I have 2 gigabyte partitions on this drive that I did after my install, but the actual install process, it won't automatically work with a drive this size. I think what we'll do is I'll actually demo what happens if you try to install it on a disk that's larger than 2 gig, just so you know in case you run into it with your own installs. Now, if you don't have an internal CD-ROM, you will have this 50-pin SCSI. Now, this is actually going to end up being handy for this video because it gives you the chance to use drives like this. This is a 50-pin SCSI drive that I've had kicking around forever. It's even got the $4.99 price tag from when I bought this at a computer store back in like the early 2000s. It also gives you the chance to use SCSI to SD. Now, I already did a test install on a SCSI to SD just to make sure it worked, but there is something you need to know about doing the SCSI to SD, and that's that you have to manually edit your cylinder and track information, because what the defaults that this uses, it's actually not compatible directly with the older Sun system. It's like out of spec for what a hard drive normally would have. I've got a wiki article on one of my websites which will describe how to do that. This information is also available on the nextcomputer.org forum. I think it's nextcomputer or nextcomputers.org. They've got forums which describe how to use the SCSI to SD and NeXTSTEP. So for the install, one of the times I do the install will be on this 2 gigabyte SCSI drive. The other time I will show a larger SCSI drive and what will happen when it fails. So in the SPARCstation 5, your CPU is, I think it is actually in a socket on this model, not, it looks like it is removable, so potentially I could upgrade this. I'm not too sure if the board will let me do that. This is the 70 megahertz version. This unit did also come in 85 and 110 megahertz versions. There was also I think it was 170 megahertz Hyper Spark or Turbo Spark. Now that is not compatible with NeXTSTEP. If you are doing a NeXTSTEP or OpenSTEP install, you will need to make sure you have the 70, 85, or 110 megahertz CPU models. Something also to note about the SPARCstation 5, it's got, this is I think the S bus for expansion cards. However, this one at the end is the AFX slot specifically for the graphics card. And what I have in this one is the S24 24-bit frame buffer. So that'll give you 24-bit graphics using the 13W3 video port. So if you don't have a monitor that uses this port, you will of course need an adapter. And you will also need a monitor that does sync on green. Not all monitors will do that, but I do have a monitor that I used on my SGI, and I will use it for this one as well. The power supply, obviously a Sun proprietary unit. One thing I will note is the fans that are in the power supply, they actually bring the air from the outside in instead of taking the air from inside the case outward. So, well, in either case, you want to make sure you don't block the vents that are down here, because that will cause some problems with your airflow. The RAM for this system is some sort of proprietary RAM, I'm pretty sure. I don't really know too much about it. This system came with 160 megabytes of RAM, and honestly that's enough for NeXTSTEP, so I'm not going to bother changing that. And one thing I will note about the NVRAM battery down here, if this battery goes dead, your Sun system will have problems doing booting. It'll forget its MAC address, and you'll have to manually enter a bunch of environment variables. For some reason, this one does not seem to be dead, although I'm pretty sure this computer won't hold its time and date anymore. but I am able to boot this computer without any manual intervention. So I don't know, somehow this is still working in this computer, but if you have a SPARCstation that has a dead battery, you can go on eBay and find a battery kit from, I think it's Glitchworks. They've got this, it's a socket, one of these, but it's got a cell battery thing that's mounted on the top. So it's a direct drop-in replacement. And I will be doing that eventually when I'm assuming this will finally crap out and cause me boot problems, but it still works for now, but I will keep that option in mind for the future. Something I will note about the SCSI drives here, now unfortunately my bracket piece kind of, the plastic behind here broke, but it still works just fine. Now, I did mention that the 80-pin SCA plug determines your SCSI ID and stuff like that without like jumpers or stuff like that. So, on the Sun system, the bottom plug is SCSI ID 3 and the top plug is SCSI ID 1. Now, if you are using an 80-pin SCA drive in your SPARCstation, you will need to make sure it's installed in the bottom slot, because the Sun Open firmware or whatever will default to SCSI ID 3 for booting. Now, you can have a disk in ID 1 and still boot from it, but you will have to manually configure that in the bootloader configuration, because it will only look for ID 3 by default. And on the topic of SCSI IDs, I will note that your SCSI CD-ROM has to be ID 6 in order to boot. Now, if you had an internal CD-ROM, it would probably have the jumper set to ID 6. In my case, I had to open up the case for my external CD-ROM and actually jumper it to ID 6 specifically so the Sun could boot off of it. When we get to that part of the video, you'll see when you do the boot CD-ROM command, it will immediately look for SCSI ID 6, and if it's not there, I don't know. You might be able to specify the ID manually, but you might as well just do it how the SPARCstation expects it. Yeah. So if we take a closer look at the ports on the back, starting from over here, obviously we have power. This port here is our SCSI interface, which I will be using for my external CD-ROM. Next up, these two small plugs here, this is somehow tied to the network adapter. However, I've never seen this type of plug before. I don't know how to use it. I don't know, someday I might look into it, but you do have your 10 base T Ethernet, standard Ethernet plug here, so it doesn't really matter. Next up, we do actually have two serial ports. Now, there is a difference between these. One of them is port A, one of them is port B. Now, if you're not using a keyboard on your system, it will default to only allowing video on the serial port. So when I first bought this computer, I didn't actually have the keyboard yet. So it disables your video and only outputs on the serial plug, and I think you have to use serial plug A, because serial plug B only kicks in after the operating system is loaded, or something like that. But if you want the full console output directly from the computer booting and through that entire process, you have to use plug A. And then moving on from that, we do have like our audio input and output plugs, and I think this is, oh yeah, the keyboard plug is over here. Now you'll notice there's only the keyboard plug, there's no additional port for the mouse. This is because the mouse actually plugs into the Sun keyboard, kind of like one of those Mac ADB keyboards. So just a single port for your keyboard and mouse combination. So I think that concludes my tour of the SPARCstation 5. This is a fairly neat computer. I like the specific look of this machine. The SPARCstation 10 doesn't have this look to it, it's just more of this the entire way across. And the SPARCstation 10 also doesn't have the spot for the internal CD-ROM. If I wasn't going to get a SPARCstation 5, I would have liked a SPARCstation 20, which looks exactly the same as this. The SPARCstation 20 does give you some options, like the ability to have multiple CPUs. SPARCstation 5 is a single CPU unit only. SPARCstation 10 and 20 will both support multiple CPUs, but it is important for me to note that NeXTSTEP will not use them. NeXTSTEP and OpenSTEP will only use one CPU and that's it. So having any additional CPUs in your computer is entirely pointless. It won't break anything to have them in there, as far as I know. It sounds like it just basically flat out won't do anything with them, just ignores them. But if you are using a Spark machine for NeXTSTEP specifically, there would be no point to having those in there. It would just generate additional heat, and because of the nature of the pizza box case, heat would be a concern. So far I'm not really having any problems with this one. The SCSI hard drive that I use in here on a daily basis, it does generate, I think, more heat than an average hard drive would at the time, because the hard drive I'm using is 10,000 RPM. And I think at the time, most hard drives were probably 5400 or 7200. So a bit more heat coming from the drive, but the system seems fine as is. So yeah, if you're looking for a nice Spark machine for it, the SPARCstation 5, 10, and 20 are probably the best bet for compatibility. The Spark install for NeXTSTEP, I didn't have to do any extra configuration. It just worked out of the box with everything in here. You can use other models. I think the SPARCstation LX or Classic may be one of those, as long as it runs on the Sun 4M architecture. I think that's basically the one thing you need to watch out for. So there's other models of the SPARCstation line you can use, but in my opinion, it's probably best to go with the 5, 10, or 20 if you want to use NeXTSTEP or OpenSTEP. So I think what we'll do now is take a look at the actual installation process. So this part here, it would have been much nicer if I could capture the video directly into my recording computer, but the resolution that NeXTSTEP uses is a little too weird for my capture device. I think NeXTSTEP was outputting at 1152 by 900 resolution, and that's just too odd for my my other computer to work with. So unfortunately, I'm just going to have to point the camera at the screen. So what I've got here, I've just turned the SPARCstation on, and I've got my CD-ROM drive connected, and I've got one of my other SCSI drives into the 50-pin SCSI connector. So my original boot drive, which was SCSI ID 3, is no longer in the computer. So as you can see, the computer can't boot off of anything. We want to take a look at what SCSI IDs have been assigned. I think we just do probe SCSI. So, okay, it's missing the CD-ROM drive, but that won't be a problem. What we've got here, target 1 is SCSI ID 1, and we are using the Seagate 2GB hard drive. So now my SCSI drive is SCSI ID 6. I already did have that set. What I'm going to do is type in boot CD-ROM, and I can't find it. Excellent. We're off to a great start. I'm going to reboot the computer. Oh, look at that. Finally shows up. So, target 6 is SCSI ID 6. Now we can do the boot CD-ROM. Now, it does give us a few seconds if we want to boot into single user mode. You can do -S, or you can do these other commands in here. We're not going to bother with single user mode. It just drops us into a prompt where we could do any custom commands that we might need to do. Single user mode is where you'd go if you wanted to try and manually edit the install script for disks larger than 2 GB, but we're not going to do that here because I don't have a floppy drive that you have to work with. So there's more information about that online, so I won't get into too much detail on that, but we're just going to go through the installation prompts here. And now it's loading up the mock kernel. Yeah, you can see mode configured 1152 by 900, so yeah, bit of an odd resolution. Preposterous time in a real-time clock. Interesting. And yeah, it does say that SD0 is our configured drive, and it is the 2 GB drive. So it sees the main hard drive, and we're going to go ahead and type 1 to install NeXTSTEP. Ready to install. So we basically have the initial part of the install going. For the sake of saving time, I don't think I'll bother performing a test installation with a drive that's too large for NeXTSTEP. I'll just point out that if you get to this part here where it's doing all of the file installs, you have made it far enough into the installer that your drive is fully compatible. If on the previous screen before this, where it was like telling you it'll be a few minutes, if you start seeing a bunch of weird messages about read-only files and stuff like that, and then it just reboots your computer, that means that it can't slice your hard drive into the proper sizes properly, and your drive is just too big for it to deal with. So if you have made it to this part, then congratulations, things will probably work out for you. And this will take a while, so I think we'll just skip ahead and I'll pick up recording when we get into the next portion here. Alright, so the first stage of the installation is pretty much done. It's copied enough software to the hard drive where it is going to initiate a reboot. Hard disk is ready to use. Press return to restart. Sure. It's going to take forever, isn't it? Now, one thing I'm going to note is because the hard drive that I have in here for this test is not on SCSI ID 3, the SPARCstation is going to not boot. So I will have to manually tell it to boot off of disk 1, which I will do here momentarily. So yeah, it can't find its default configured boot, so we do run boot disk 1, and there we go. We're going to enter for the standard boot. It's 9 o'clock at night, so I'm drinking coffee. This is going to take forever, I think. So it looks like it's finding all of our Sun drivers and whatnot. Oh, it's trying to do some networking. We'll hit Control-C to ignore that for now. The network is plugged in, but we'll deal with that later. Alright, so I don't think we're going to change anything in here. It did find all of our drivers for these devices, which is basically all automatic on the Spark boot CD. Yeah, S24 graphics, Sun mouse, Sun Ethernet, Sun SCSI, yes, all of that is accurate. So we'll just click Save. Okay, so now we're going to actually finish the NeXTSTEP install. We're going to keep the NeXTSTEP Essentials. We're going to unselect pretty much all of this stuff. I don't need any of this for the stock install here, and it would just take up my time. Printer, don't need Emacs, don't need that. On a 2 gig drive, I mean, yeah, you can install all of this. It's not really going to take up that much space, but for the sake of getting this film done in a timely fashion, we're just going to go ahead and install only the bare minimum. And install. Oh, okay. So it turns out that portion was actually already the installed part, and all of the other stuff was just extra. So now it just says to restart. Okay. And same deal when we restart back into the Sun Open Boot system. We're going to have to tell it to use drive 1 any day now. And boot disk 1. And we're just going to hit enter to make this go faster. We get the brief delay as it tries to do something with our network. Control C. Okay, so this is the standard welcome screen. It might look a little familiar for Mac OS X users. I think this thing with the multiple languages is done on all of the Mac installs as well. It's not really that big of a surprise though, because NeXTSTEP and OpenStep are pretty much the basis of the modern Mac operating system. So I'm just going to go ahead with the defaults. Now, I don't know the proper way you're supposed to be doing all of this, but it takes you in as this Me account. But then what you want to do, most likely, is double-click on this icon here, which is the Preferences icon. And if you go over here, your password, okay, create. And I'm just going to make a password. Yes, password changed, and the rest of this don't need to really worry about. And then we quit, and then we do the logout. Oh, I just ejected my CD. Now I want to go in as root, and I think, yeah, so now I can log in as the root user with no password, because the password I just set was that Me account. And, I mean, if you're really wanting to use a multi-user environment, probably don't use root for everything, but for the purposes of this test, and I think for my own purposes, I just use root. Because I don't really care. I just want to have that super usability all the time. So now that I am logged in as root, though, it does give me all of these other options here. So for example, I can open up my terminal, and I can do other stuff here. What I'm going to do right now is actually configure the network, and try to remember which one that was. I think you go to, actually, let me give me some icons. Under the next admin, if you go to hostmanager.app, this gets a little confusing because we're not using an actual NeXTSTEP network like this thing wants to do. That's if you have a network of Next computers. We want to do basically just standalone networking. So when we open up the host manager, the menu over here changes. Now it says host manager at the top, and it gives us this thing here that says local. So we want to click that, and we want to use local domain only. So we click that one, an alert. We don't care. I think this one here, reachable only by local net. I think that's what we want to use. For my internet address, I need to enter a random IP address, my internal network. My net mask is correct there. Broadcast address, we're just going to leave as default. Time standard, I'm not going to bother with network time right now. My router IP, which is the gateway for your network. If we look at host name, we'll just call this one Spark. And NIS domain name, we leave that as none, because whatever, we don't care about that. Network has been switched to a non-netinfo network. Netinfo is that specific Next networking, I think. And it gives you options for making this like a server, sort of workstation stuff. I don't really have the time to look into that much in detail, because it involves, I think, having a bunch of other services that you got to configure. So yeah, we're just going to go ahead and have this done. So this will at least get us online. And it will require a reboot. I like the sound of the hard drive churning away. The real retro computing sound. Okay, so we're gonna go back in as root, and the root didn't have a password. It was the me account that did, but we're not gonna bother using that. Root for everything. What could go wrong, you know? Anyway, let's go and open up our terminal. And we're going to do a ping of 10.16.1.1. This is my gateway. It works. And we're going to ping the Google name server, and it works as well. So we've just basically done a very basic configuration of the networking. This machine is now on my internal network, and I can proceed with whatever else I want to do. If you insert a CD-ROM drive, it will show up in your root area here, which has gone back to not this, what I want to look at, icons. Yeah, if you, well, what I'm going to do right now is I'll put the NeXTSTEP CD-ROM drive, or CD-ROM back into the drive, and it should show up here momentarily. There we go. So if you click on this, it'll load the drive, and that's it here. It does give you, I think everything that's on this CD is actually already installed in the hard drive. Let's take a look at what's under here, demos. Oh yeah, see, these are like some of the basic applications that come on the CD. Actually, I wonder if these are already installed on the hard drive. Demos. Not all of them. That's actually interesting. So yeah, if you wanted to get all of those applications, I don't think I'm going to demo any of these particular applications. Actually, I'm just going to open this chess one. If memory serves, this chess application is still the one that's distributed with Mac OS X, or whatever they call it now, Mac OS. If it still is included. I think this was on the earlier versions of the operating system. But yeah, supposedly this should look familiar for any modern Mac users. So there's a bunch of other CDs that are available for NeXTSTEP to get additional software. There is another developer CD, which will give you applications like Interface Builder, which I don't have on here right now, but in the next part of this video I will go through a bunch of additional applications on my other hard drive. So if you do your NeXTSTEP install, it basically gets you this, and then if you're wondering where to go from here, you can either download and burn the ISO images from all the additional NeXTSTEP software, or you can actually use command line FTP. That does feature an FTP client in there. This is how I originally grabbed some of the first software packages for my other hard drive, and I did also download a graphical FTP client, so I wouldn't have to use this. But yeah, you can't, as far as I know, you can't mount ISOs in NeXTSTEP. So when you're downloading ISOs of software on the internet, you will have to either burn it to CD, or if you have another Unix or Linux computer in your house, you can set up an NFS share and use one of these applications and actually mount NFS. If we look at NeXTadmin, oh shoot, I'm still in the CD-ROM drive. We can see that because it's right there. Go back here, NeXTadmin. NFS Manager, this one, which is also the icon that's over here. So you can actually mount NFS shares over your network, and this is another way to get software into your NeXTSTEP install. I don't have any to demo, so won't bother with that. The rest of this stuff you probably won't really need to deal with. User Manager, I did use this one. If we look at root, for example, user has no password, I know. I believe this is where I changed my login shell. On the other hard drive I've got, I'll demo a bunch of stuff, and I'll also show that I've switched to the bash shell instead of CSH, and I think you can just do that in here. However, bash is not installed by default, so you will have to actually go download the bash shell, which you can find on some FTPs and mirror sites with NeXTSTEP software, and that's, I think, how the best way to change it. If you go into the etc/password file and change it there, I think it'll have no effect. I don't think there's anything else I was going to briefly mention here. Oh yeah, so one last thing I guess I'll bring up is if you are wanting to use large hard drives, so the hard drive that's in here right now is 2 gigs. That wasn't really enough for me, so where is it here? This is the actual hard drive with the NeXTSTEP install on it that I'll be using. It's a Cheetah 10,000 RPM drive. It's a 73 gig, but it can't use really any of that space. It's limited to a handful of 2 gig partitions. You have to either see if NeXTSTEP will automatically detect the physical layout of the drive, or you will have to manually enter that information into what's called the disk tab, which is located at etc/disk tab. This file here is where you would configure all of the attributes of your hard drive. So let's see, like sectors, cylinders, number of partitions, all of that stuff. It has a whole index of what they all mean here. And this is like a sample of what it looks like. So like the name of it, number of cylinders, number of tracks, number of sectors. I think this was sector size, so like 1024, 512, 2048, I have no idea. And then each slice of your drive would be like this. So there'd be PA is your like start sector, SA I think was like the size, the total size or something, and then your next slice would be PB, and then SB, and then PC and stuff like that. So it's kind of confusing if you're a first-time user. But I did manage to figure it out and get a 73 gig SCSI drive detected in a computer made like, what, more than 20 years ago? I don't even know how old this would be now. So yeah, I think what we'll do then is we'll cut over to the next part of the video, which is showing off a bunch of the software that I've installed onto my other hard drive. If you need any assistance with NeXTSTEP, I would recommend checking out the Next Computer forums. It's like a site for Next hobbyists, I guess. I got a lot of useful information there, including how to actually clone my install. So because I can't directly install NeXTSTEP onto that other hard drive I have, I actually had to clone the install from a 2 gig drive over to it. So even if you partition a drive, you can't then go install NeXTSTEP on it because it'll actually overwrite that and it'll fail because the drive is too big. So I had to make my disk tab, partition the drive, then put it in the computer that already had NeXTSTEP installed, and then I had someone on the forums had a clone command that basically did like a raw dump of literally your entire hard drive onto a second hard drive, and that actually worked out. So yeah, very useful information that's on there, and I'd recommend checking that out. And I don't think there's anything else really going to talk about for the default install here. So yeah, stay tuned for the next bit coming up. This is my final install that I've got on the 73 gig SCSI drive. So I've already done a lot of application installs and some customizations. So I'm just going to go through some of the stuff that I've got on here. Right off the bat here, I am running the bash shell. I think the original shell was CSH or something like that. I'm you know, a fairly big Linux user, so I am familiar with the bash shell, and I decided to use this for a number of reasons, but I'm also primarily using it because I'm most familiar with it, and I like some of the conveniences like tab completion and stuff like that. So my terminal is using bash. You do have to install this yourself. It's not included with NeXTSTEP. It's part of an FTP archive I found somewhere. Same thing with all of the other software I've got installed. This is all downloaded from FTP mirrors and stuff like that. So I'm just going to take a quick scroll through what I've got here, and actually what I'm going to do is show some applications from the dock first. One thing I'm going to show first is this is, I think it's Interface Builder. This is the programming utility that allows you to create applications for NeXTSTEP. I haven't really used this at all, so I really have no idea what I'm doing, but basically the point of this is to, you know, actually build a programming interface. Oh, come on, really? There we go. So, you know, you could put like a big ass button in your application and then it does other things. Let's see. I really have no idea what I'm doing here. I'm sure there's, oh, it's probably down here. Here we go. So this is kind of where I guess you could make it do different things. Yeah, I haven't really spent any time whatsoever on this. This is probably the second time I've even opened the application. So this is basically just how you build graphical interfaces for software you want to develop. I don't know if I'll actually ever bother with this. I don't think I would be really smart enough to do any programming for this operating system. Yeah. But next up, this is a web browser. This is Omniweb. And it's just loading up a local page here. So, let's see. It does come with a bunch of bookmarks. You probably can't go to any of these anymore. Like, these just wouldn't load anymore. Let's see. For example, computer software. Some of these, obviously, Next, their website, I don't think resolves anymore after the Apple merger. Just takes you nowhere, I think. But yeah, like Adobe, that's not going to load in this. But there is one site that I keep running. This, however, does load the AltexNet website. One thing I did notice, though, these are animated GIFs, but they're not actually animated in this browser for some reason. They're just stuck on the first frame of the image. So, I don't know, I thought that was kind of weird, but who knows. So, yeah, you can't really go to any modern websites in this. Really not much else I can show, so let's just quit. This is the terminal, which I've already got going here. This program, I think, was some sort of website builder type deal. It's basically like a text editor, but specifically for HTML. So, for example, under our HTML, we want to start off our document with HTML tags, and then if we wanted to add, let's see, header, body is an index, blah blah, miscellaneous, lists, some random stuff. Oh, I think there's a, you can add the blink tag, which I believe has been stripped from every web browser now for years. That's it's too bad. It's a nice relic from the 90s. But yeah, so I mean, if for some reason you were just too lazy to type out your tags for your HTML page, this program would do it for you. I don't know. I might toy around with it sometime. Not really a big deal for me though. One thing that's nice is this graphical FTP client. When I first loaded up NeXTSTEP on this system, I did have to use the console FTP application to download my first software packages, one of which was this graphical interface, so I could see a decent list of the software in the archive I was downloading from, which I've bookmarked here. This is the AltexNet public FTP. So I've already got the address in here. We're going to log into it. And it's an anonymous FTP, so we just do login again. And wait for it to load up. So now we're going to take a look at software. Let's go down to NeXTSTEP and OpenStep. Some random files we've got in here, but if we go to software, this is where we've got a very, well, not the largest, but a decent size list of available applications for NeXTSTEP and OpenStep. This is, I believe, where I picked up the Bash shell from. It wasn't this exact version. I'm running Bash 2.0, so I've got a newer version here. But one thing I will point out, when you're coming across archive software for NeXTSTEP and OpenStep, there's a code that you have to be aware of in the file name, because this will depend on the kind of computer you're using, if the software will run or not. If you look at here where it says NIHS, this is basically an application that will run on all versions of NeXTSTEP. So it's the Next hardware, the Intel hardware, the HP RISC hardware, and S for the SPARC hardware, which is what obviously this computer is using. So if we look at something like this, Bash 3.2 what is that, 5 or 6 or something, it's only got the N, so this might only run on original 68K Next hardware, whereas the application above it says NIHS, so this probably, or should, run on any of the hardware that NeXTSTEP was available for. I've got a lot of the stuff on here that does support the SPARC platform because I was extracting some collections of software specifically to upload to this FTP. So a lot of the stuff I do have in here will run on the SPARC platform, but you also will find software that is Next or Intel only. So that's just something to be aware of if you are looking for software on your Next machine. Couple of these things down here. This is like the original World Wide Web browser.
I think this is, yeah, this is 68K only, which is the type of machine it was developed on. So I can't try that out at all, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, if you are looking for software for your next station or your next step installation, the AltexaNet FTP does have a lot of stuff there. So that's what I've used to transfer files to this computer. So we'll quit out of that. Let's see what else we have here. Let's take a look at some graphics. So I don't really know what else you do with this program here. I mean, it's got this neat design, and I don't know, the performance of this seems pretty decent. This is, you know, just basically a 70 megahertz SPARC processor, so it's, I don't know, it's got some graphics ability, I suppose. I would say faster than any of the original black Next hardware, because I think that topped out at around 33 megahertz of a 68040 processor, not including any hack jobs or upgrades that people have done to their machines since then. So, I mean, like, I'm still using a very low-end SPARC workstation, but its performance is okay. So, and you can, let's see, display options. We can change this. Goes a bit faster. I don't know. I haven't really done much with this software, so I don't know how to use it properly. But you know, it's neat. What is this one? I think this is another demo mode. Some options are disabled. Who cares? So this is like a fairly high-end looking 3D application. I'm not very good with 3D, so I don't really know how to use this stuff properly. What I was able to accomplish in my testing of this before, let's see, I was able to put an elephant on my screen, and that's kind of like the extent of my ability here. I don't really know what I'm doing. It's like, okay, we got our elephant. How do we make it bigger? I don't know. Oh, there we go. Go in a bit. And I think if we go render, oh no. I need a light source. Give me some lights. Ambient. I think we have to put it here. Okay, so the elephant changed color. I don't know what that means. Really? Come on. So I have to click the elephant? Render? Why are you doing this to me? I have no idea. Oh, this is unfortunate. Alright, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to quit. I've also got this resource meter that I had going, so when we were using this other application, it's like spiked the CPU and the load average of the system, so that was pretty much using the maximum processor ability of the SPARC. Let's see what else we have here. I don't think I've looked at this one yet. Another demo. Yeah, sure, whatever. I think this one. What did I do here? Let's take a look. Oh yeah, I think I made a teapot. And let's see. Look what we have. And then we can render it, kind of. There we go. Or if we close that, we go to textures, or actually let's go to shaders. Do something weird. I think we just drag this over to it. And then this change to surface. Let's see what we do here. Select it again. I'm using this tool here, by the way. And we wait for the, oh, there we go. Okay, this looks a little ridiculous. I don't know, yeah. Cool. So yeah, I don't know how to do anything with graphics, as you can clearly see. Anyway, let's look at this one. This is from, I think, the same company that produced the program we just looked at. This is like, I think, just a two-dimensional drawing program. Demo. Oops. This looks so weird. Okay. Let's quit. So yeah, these are the applications that I've bound to my my dock or quick launch panel or whatever you want to call it. The very end of it is the recycle bin. When you want to delete something, you drag it here. But I do have a lot more software. I'm not going to go through all of this stuff. Just going to point out some of the more notable ones. I really wish this would work. This is Doom 2. But if I try to run it, unknown pixel encoding on frame buffer. Now, the actual software, if we go to the file menu and we go to, nope, we go to edit, nope, we go to view, nope, we go to info, nope. Okay, here we go. Inspector under tools. Let's see. So under contents, it will tell us this software here is made for the Motorola 68K, the Intel, the HP, and the Spark. So the Doom 2 application is made for this, is compiled for this platform, but it basically doesn't run. Something to do with graphics, I don't really know. Haven't been able to figure it out yet. I will be looking into that. But yeah, that would be one of the neat programs to get running on this thing. Unfortunately, it does not work. I do have a bunch of other, let's see. Oh, we already looked at that one. That was that 3D program. Solitaire, something about the moon. Other 3D programs, some sound programs. One thing I did notice, the sound on this SPARCstation does not work, and I don't know if it's something to do with the driver or the onboard speaker itself. I haven't tried anything further with that yet. Let's see, what else do we have here? Back bounce. This made like a strange, it looked like basically a screensaver as your background. I don't know what the point is. Toy viewer, something to do with images, I don't really know. Cycles. This is kind of one of these performance meters, like the one I've actually got going down here. So this is like almost the exact same thing. I think it just tells you the CPU load that you've got. But I already have a couple of those running, so we're just going to quit out of that. I think these two are news group readers. I think this is an email client. Earthquake. This is strange. I don't really know what. I guess this is something for like educational use or whatever. It's like an earthquake simulator. So if we pick Northern California, let's go ahead and start an earthquake. And we'll give it a couple seconds, and then we'll go finish earthquake. And it gives us this. This is interesting for someone. I can't see any point in having this for myself, but whatever. Oh, FlyLab. This program is, you can mate flies, if it will actually load. Come on. So yeah, we've got the mating window. So here we have design a fly. So here's our female fly. Drag it. Come on. Drag it down here. And then we go and make a male fly. And we change it slightly. Weird. And we'll drag it here. And I think the last time I clicked this, it broke. Oh, something happened. It opened up this. However, there's nothing here. It's just a thing. Why did you break? What the hell? Okay. You know what? I don't care. Oh, what the hell is that? Something popped up. Interesting. So, I mean, yeah, if you want to pretend like you're mating some flies, this is the program for you. Yes. Let's see. Some very basic games we have in here. Oh, this program, I think. Select an image. Don't say it to anyone. Keep the image you have selected in your mind. Okay. We're going to pick the Canadian flag. And this program is going to read our mind. So we click the button. I have chosen an image. Is your image here? It's a Canadian flag, so we'll click yes. Is your image here? No. Is your image here? No. Is your image here? Yes. Wow. It read my mind. Yeah. What a waste of time. Anyway, so we have the graphics programs that we already looked at. Bunch of sound programs. This is like, I think you can like write your own musical score. So you can like drag and drop notes and various things. And I can't do any playback here because I think I mentioned already the audio on this system. I haven't really worked it out yet, so that's unfortunate. Let's see. We've got some more graphics programs. Diagram. Yes, demo. Jesus. This was like a Visio type program. So you could do like, you could drag your next over here. And then you have your Sun SPARCstation and your IBM PC and your Mac. And then you have a cloud in the middle. So yeah, like I guess you could do flowcharts and whatever you want. So it's kind of like Microsoft Visio. So that's neat. Let's see. Here's one that's kind of weird. Net Surfer. This is kind of like, this supposedly was supposedly was like an all-in-one bundle type thing that would open websites and Gopher and FTPs demo. So like, under computing, you go to the Next Answers website, you go to the Next website, the FTP for Next, the Sun website, the Silicon Graphics website, the Apple website, and let's see, we had Atlanta Forecast Gopher. What else we have here? Internet Shopping, Commerce Net. Or we have Web Crawler and Lycos, Yahoo, Babylon 5. I wonder how many of these still exist. I don't know if, 'cause I don't think. Oh, it's actually trying to load, and it's a text-based browser, I think. That is strange. Well, just for fun, let's try to open Yahoo. Error code 400, oh, whatever. It's probably not going to go anywhere. Web. Don't think this will load. Host not found. Yeah. So this is extremely outdated. None of this is going to work. That's unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, this is like some interesting stuff in here because not a whole lot of these companies exist anymore. And let's see, we've got OpenWrite. This is like a, I think this is actually pretty decent looking word processor. Create document. Yes, demo. Where's the menu? Maybe this is not the one I was looking at. Oh, wait, here we go. Cedar Word. Run as demo. Yeah, this kind of looks like an early version of Microsoft Word or something like that. I don't know. I thought this this layout was pretty familiar for PC and Mac users. So yeah. Let's take a look at. Oh, we're gonna look at this newsgroup reader. I do have like 3 or 4 of these on this computer, but this one I think was the one I liked the most. So I've already configured this for the Altexinet newsgroup server, and if we drop down into testing, it gives us a bunch of random crap articles that I was doing tests with. It says the year is 69, which is obviously not correct. Let's make a post. Subject. And we click post. Yeah, this is hilarious. Your post is about to be distributed to hundreds of machines. It's actually only distributed to one machine because my newsgroup server for Altexinet is not linked with any others. So, are you really sure you want to do this? Yes, I am. Post. And do I click this button? And then I go back in. And there's a new message I haven't read yet. Next step testing. Oh, I guess that's all there is to it. So, yeah, this is kind of neat. I guess the internet has changed so much that this is really irrelevant now. You're not going to find a whole lot of real posts on news groups. I think it's mostly spam and binaries now, so oh well. But yeah, when you're doing installs of software, some of them by default go in this local apps directory. Sometimes they'll specify a different directory. Sometimes I went into like another directory called apps. So a couple applications of mine kind of found their way in here. And then the ones that are included with the NeXTSTEP operating system, they'll typically be in these folders. So Next Apps, if we open this one, yeah, these are like the, well, with the exception of a couple of these ones. I tried to get Quake on here, but that's a no-go for now. These are the applications that are included with the operating system. So your basic text editor, like your preferences and stuff. Oh, the email client. We'll open this up. What the hell is this? My computer tried to send an email. One of the programs on my computer attempted to send an email to Italy, and it was bounced to me. Oh no, okay. I guess it just couldn't resolve the it couldn't resolve the name it was trying to go to, so it didn't even leave the computer, I guess. Interesting. It tried to send an email with my computer's information. Weird. Anyway, I opened this actually to show you the email that's included with every NeXTSTEP install. And it's a welcome email from Steve Jobs. We're his new colleague. Some blurbs about NeXTSTEP here. And the signature. Neat. So yeah, you can do a lot of neat stuff with this operating system. Oh yeah, I was going to bring up the way I've partitioned this disk. It's a 73 gig disk, but you have a file system limit of 2 gigabytes per slice. So what I do have is my main root slice is 2 gigs. I have a folder for incoming that's also 2 gigs, and then I have a folder for storage, and that's 2 gigs. And these are already mounted in here, and this is where I put all of the downloads that I have yet to go through and before I install them. And then storage is just a bunch of like random documents and crap. So I probably could have made a few more slices on the disk that I'm using, but I mean, really, what's the point? When this operating system was around, a lot of people were using disks below 2 gigabytes in total size, and everything was fine. I still have quite a bit of space left over. The root partition, where I've got most of my stuff installed, I've still got over 1 gig free, and it's a 2 gig partition. So, yeah, I don't really need a whole lot of space for this operating system or the applications. Let's see. The incoming, yeah, I got a decent amount of space there. So, yeah, it doesn't take a lot of space to run this stuff. The main problem is physical hard drives of that era. They're probably long dead, or if they still run, they're going to have horrible bearing noises that will just want to, yeah, I don't even, it makes me mad because it just drives me up the wall. So the drive I'm using in this computer, if the drive is idle, I can't even hear it spin. So that's why I'm using it. But yeah, my overall impression of NeXTSTEP is it's a nicely built operating system. There's a few things that I kind of don't like, and that's if you have your menus open and you click on what you want, the menu stays open no matter what you're doing. So you can click elsewhere and move things around, and this isn't going to go away until you kind of like unclick it back on your menu. I mean, it's once you get used to it, it's not really a big deal, but I haven't really seen a whole lot of other menu systems that operate like that. So it's kind of annoying for me, but I can live with it. There's also some other weird things it's got here. Let's see. There's one feature in particular I was looking for, but I have no idea where it is. Oh well. Let's take a look at processes. I don't really have anything running here. Yeah. Oh, gotta unclick that, of course. So yeah, I like this operating system quite a bit. I'm going to have this as my primary system on the SPARCstation computer here. I'm not going to bother going with Solaris or anything like that. So eventually I will want to learn more about NeXTSTEP and download more software. See where I can get with some of the programs I've got on here. Like I really want to get Doom running. I think that would be awesome, but I don't know. There's a bunch of other stuff that's in here I'm not going to bother talking about. I don't think you really need to join your computer to a network or anything like that. If you are doing like remote storage, it does it with NFS. I think there actually are ports of things like Samba, but I don't have any need for that, so I didn't bother installing it. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's all I've got to show you here. Cool.
You've reached the end of my NeXTSTEP video. If you've made it this far, that means you must really like NeXTSTEP. If you're looking for more information on the NeXTSTEP operating system, check out the links in the description area. That should get you started if you're looking to get this installed on your own equipment. Thanks for watching.